if you just make a really solid, good game, you probably don't need the 7K wishlist.
My guest today has sold over $200,000 of his indie games, including his cult classics Mage Monsters 1 and 2.
I think it's just more or less just skill. And again, I think my game could probably have sold maybe twice as well if I had done a better meta progression system.
This is Lasse, and his experiences have led him to some counterintuitive beliefs.
Then I think you probably want to price it as high as possible. You need to make a game that's ready for a person like Splattercat to be, okay, this is actually pretty cool. If you can, you should always, before you release your game, you should try to have your next game ready as a Steam page.
Yeah, and what would you say is the biggest lesson you took away from those first two games?
You need to always be able to...
You, for a while, spent 10 to 15 hours a day playing Dota, and you even chased this dream of becoming a professional player. So how did you turn that obsession into being obsessed with game dev?
So basically, in my youth, I played a lot of Dota 1, and I also... I was actually one of the best in the world, and I went to Sweden in a LAN, in a tournament there, and we actually won. So I was actually in one of the best teams at that time in Dota 1. But I ended up having a lot of issues with my hand. Basically, I think very poor posture when I was playing, and then also playing way too much, and probably also some other issues with not really being able to relax ever. So I ended up having like a lot of muscular issues. So I had to basically stop playing, taking that seriously. And so I actually ended up going very far away from anything to do with a computer and ended up studying philosophy at my local university, or I actually traveled a bit. So I wanted to get some skills which had nothing computer related, so I wouldn't end up being forced to work at a computer. But then after a while, I kind of always sort of managed my, I guess, carpal tunnel or repetitive strain injury or whatever it is. And I just ended up going back to kind of figuring out that what I really wanted to do was basically just make games. That was something, I guess that was my biggest, I guess, passion. And just before that, I tried to go professional as a poker player. And I ended up being a winning poker player and making some money. But I really think what I really liked about game development and being a solo game developer is that I can schedule my own time. So if I have a day where let's say I have some pain and I'm feeling off, I can just not do work and I can relax. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know a couple of these things, the philosophy degree and also about the poker playing. That's really fun. We'll have to dive into that a little bit. Also, sorry for your injury and that kind of shut your career down. That's no fun. Never fun to lose a career.
I try to think about it kind of as a blessing in disguise, because it's hard to say how your life would have turned out if I didn't get that injury. But probably I ended up having a lot more social skills because I was basically forced to get away from the computer. So that was probably a pretty good thing. Your microphone is off right now.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah, always interesting to look back. I do the same thing. I try to kind of frame some of the negative things that happened in my life and just hold together how they made me who I am today. So glad you're able to do that as well. Is there anything in this journey to get a philosophy degree or in playing poker that has now translated to help you be a better game dev?
I think I try to consider things and as much, I would say, on my own as possible. So I think when I started playing poker, and also when I played Dota, I would just try to rely as much as on my own as possible. It's really a kind of hard balance where you want to get input from people, but you also want to take this input and you want to ask yourself, does this make sense for me? And the more proficient you are, the better you are at something, the easier I think this gets. And the more new you are, the more safe option is just basically doing what people are telling you. And I think this applies in a lot of things. So dragging philosophy into it. So basically we had this famous philosopher, Immanuel Kant. And what he's basically saying is that most people are even though they're adults, they're not really adults. They're immature. They don't think for themselves. And I think basically trying to think for yourselves and taking responsibility in basically all areas of life, and that includes your own health. You don't just say, okay, what does my doctor say to me? You basically try to think about health in your own way and what makes sense for me and how can I think about this. And I have done this a lot in game development. One example would be, I think there's some great resources, and shout out to How to Market a Game. I think that's an amazing resource and that has helped me a lot. But one thing I would disagree with, I think Capsule is very, very, very important. And I completely agree. But you don't necessarily need to pay someone a lot of money to make it. I think another way is basically finding pre-made art, either already sold, or maybe you go on some art forum and then you contact the artist and you say, hey, can I buy this and use for my game? And you just get it pre-made and it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah, I wondered if if you had made those capsules yourself, because you definitely have a sort of format on all of your games that I looked at. There's a similar style, similar composition, maybe, so to speak. So we'll jump back into that. Maybe when we get to those games. Just sticking kind of in your early journey, do you remember those earliest days whenever you switched to become a game dev? Was it really difficult for you to become a game dev? Was it quite easy? Were there times you wanted to give up? What was it like in those early stages whenever you were making this jump?
I think what really helped for me is being able to just have some tutorials where I can just see exactly what other people are doing. So actually, before I started working with Unity, I had tried to make a game inside the Dota 2 engine, and there's not that many tutorials. So I very quickly got stuck on stuff. And then I would ask people in, say, a Discord on forum, hey, I'm stuck on this. What do I do? And they would say something like, oh, this function, you need to, I don't know, make this loop. And I would be, what is a loop? And they would just laugh at me and be like, you need to study basic programming. I cannot help you. And okay, I'm stuck now. So being able, I distinctly remember, and I've recommended that so much, it's a brick breaker Unity tutorial, I think from Code Academy or something like that. And that was just amazing. Just being able to just see exactly how someone who knows what they're doing just do it, and then I can just copy it, and that works. So that's a really good way for me to learn stuff.
Yeah, so just finding a nice tutorial to help you build up the basics, that makes a lot of sense. And something else you said that I found interesting was just that you really believe that developers in those early stages, they shouldn't think about making money at all. They should just focus on getting better and learning. So do you feel like you accomplished that in those early days?
Yeah, I think so. Basically, I tried to make my goal just be, for my first game, just release it. Just release it. And I actually ended up failing in that goal because my first game, Kaltuin and Clone, I I wanted that to be multiplayer. And at that point I was, either it's multiplayer or I don't want to make a game. That was my attitude. So, and especially at that point with Unity, multiplayer was just very, very difficult. And of course, I had read people say, don't make an MMO. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm not making an MMO. but people really should also have warned against multiplayer. I'm not sure how it is now. I think it might be, there's a lot easier to make multiplayer, but 5 years ago, especially in Unity, it was very, very difficult. Yeah, basically, and so I ended up hiring someone to help me with the multiplayer code. But that ended up being a trap because suddenly at some point I was not able to work on my game on my own anymore. I would basically have to oftentimes write to him and wait for him to do something for me, and it would just cost a lot of money. So I ended up just stopping that project and just I wanted to make maybe say 10 bosses. But I just made 3 and then I released that for free.
Okay, yeah. Tell me about this first game. And just you mentioned there were some bosses. Was this a boss rush kind of game, or what was this first game that you did?
Yeah, basically, so Cartoon and Clone, I would say my first 2 games, that was Cartoon and Clone and then Cartoon. So Cartoon and Clone was the multiplayer version, which I ended up giving up on and then just making that. And then after, say, 1 month, maybe 2 months of being, what do I do now? I ended up kind of some personal situation that both got me very sad, but also motivated me to basically be okay. I'm gonna make this game. Um, so then ended up doing Kaltuin, and I ended up just making that single player, which was a really good decision because suddenly the code was I could manage my own code. I did not need to hire someone else to do that for me.
Okay, this is good. I did some research on Kalturin, but I didn't realize that you also I saw Kalturin and Clone and wasn't sure which one was yours. So this is good that I did the research on half of them. I didn't realize you made both, so that's pretty funny.
Kantoon and
So do you
Clone is
consider
Kantoon and Clone is a very it's a very I would say that's almost like it's a very kind of it's a free game. Just released it for free. So some people like it and some people meme with it, and there's some funny YouTube videos. It's kind of like a very short. It's a very much my first Unity game.
Sure. Yeah, do you consider those 2 games a success?
I consider Kaltuin a success at least, and I think I did the right thing with Kaltuin and Clone. So it's very hard to kind of separate the games, but I do consider Kaltuin a success, and I actually I think so. When Cartoon launched, I was disappointed in the sales because I had hoped, okay, now I'm gonna make it as an indie developer, and I even though my expectation was just to release a game, my expectations were still too high in terms of sales because I had gotten a bit wishlist. I had a couple thousand wishlists, so I was a bit disappointed. But I think now I'm a lot more proud of the game, and I think it's a pretty solid first game. There's some stuff where, especially the UI, it's very, very rough. But I learned a lot from it, and it's Mage Monsters, which was a really big success for me, would not have been possible without Cartoon.
Yeah, and what would you say is the biggest lesson you took away from those first 2 games that you made?
I would say you need to be able to you need to always be able to rely on yourself and to do the stuff yourself and not be reliant on other, say, programmers that needs to do something for you. It can be fine to hire someone to, like, say, make some system, but it's very important that you are in control of all the code and you know all the code. And I would also say I learned stuff with, I learned some UI stuff, and I also learned that you need to try to give the player more options. There are some options with Kaltuin, but if you played it once, there's harder difficulties, but it's not like Mage Monsters where there's a lot more different playstyles and variations.
Yeah, I remember seeing a comment from you. I don't remember, maybe it was like a Reddit post, but you, for one game, felt that maybe even creating the easier difficulty mode might have actually either led to the players having a worse experience, or because I think the essentially you were saying they didn't really get the full experience because they weren't challenged, and it sort of broke this idea of like flow. Is that right? Like making a difficulty too easy can actually be a hindrance.
I think difficulty is something that's very, very complex. And I think some people might just take it, think it's more simple than it is. So one take is basically, you should always add, I just want to kind of watch this game and just scroll along. And then we probably have Dark Souls on the other end of the spectrum. And at least in the beginning of my game development, I was actually very inspired by Dark Souls. So every time I had some issue, I would be, what does Dark Souls do? I think sometimes it's not a very good idea. Say in Kaltuin, every time you die to a boss, you have to spend, say, 20 seconds to run back, which a lot of people complain about. But then I was thinking, well, you have to do that in Dark Souls, so why not here? But I think that's probably something where if you fight a boss for 2 minutes and then die, then you already have to already have to go through those 2 minutes again. So you don't really need to add extra 20 seconds to run. So I think the players their complaint is actually pretty justified that you don't need an artificial runtime.
Yeah, we'll circle back to this idea of difficulty in some of your games that, at least financially, were more successful. So your second game slash kind of third game, as I've kind of mentioned, was Mage Monsters, which actually sold 25,000 copies in just 2 months, even though it was a fairly short development cycle. So can you tell the audience about Mage Monsters and kind of just explain what that game is to start?
So Mage Monsters is a single player auto battler, and I think even now there's not that many single player auto battlers on Steam. And I was very inspired by Dota Auto Chess. So, and I wanted to think, basically, more or less myself, think about how can a auto battle work if it's single player? Because most auto battlers at that time, and I still think today, they are multiplayers. So how does it work as a single player game? And that's really what I love about game development. And I think I consider myself my best skill set is game design and trying to solve problems and trying to kind of innovate on new ways to maybe make some gameplay happen, which is also what I did on my Dota videos. I did some Dota 2 videos that got quite popular, which is Slash's Way, which is basically can you play a hero in an uncommon way. And then it's also not it's also has to be good. It's not just a meme. And that game, I spent way less on Mage Monsters than Kaltuin. I really wanted to try to make a game where most of what I invest in it is just time. So if the game doesn't become a hit, I have lost a lot of time, but I haven't lost, say, $50,000 or something, which can be quite difficult. And it's also, the cheaper you can make the game, the earlier you just start to get profit. You don't have to sell the game for 2 or 3 months before you start to say okay, now I'm actually in the green in terms of my profit.
Yeah, these short games definitely seem to be the meta in the indie game industry, and for good reason. I mean, clearly you're another example of a success here. Something interesting I think you dropped there was that you had this kind of game design challenge in that the auto battler genre has always been or is mostly known for
Yeah.
being multiplayer. So how did you actually go about solving that in a way that's fun? And what are some of the things you do as the designer for Mage and Monsters 1 that made it a single player game that's still fun even as an auto battler?
So first of all, I guess you just have your own army, and then instead of there being, basically, you don't you don't fight other computers that make a similar army or can make other armies. You're basically just fighting monsters. So in, say, auto chess, and I think also teamfight tactics, there are a few rounds where you just fight monsters. And then if you defeat those monsters, you get, say, an item. So I basically just took that and then made all the rounds monsters. Where I think one solution, some might think, okay, let's have just computers that also build an army. And I don't, that might work, but then it's like, it's much more fun to just play against humans, also in terms of meta and say, and stuff like that. So just having custom made levels that are where I'm trying to have them be as always as difficult as they can be, where sometimes let's say you have 80 archers and then you end up winning with just 5 archers and you are just, it's very nail biting. And then one of the decisions there in normal auto chess, you can lose a round a lot and you can still end up winning. In my game, it's just you lose one round, your whole army dies, and it's just game over. So there's a lot of more at stake.
Yeah, it's coming back to that Dark Souls idea of being a little bit punishing. So we're seeing kind of this blend of what makes you a game designer here, or your kind of flavor. The other thing I think about, yeah, go ahead if you had a thought
Yeah,
with that.
I would say that it's actually, in a way, it's a lot more punishing than Dark Souls, because, and I have a friend who really does not like that. But I think that the thing is, my game, if you are a bit experienced, you can play through it in like 20 minutes, max 30 minutes. So it's very similar to, and it's also, I guess it's also inspired by, say, Vampire Survivors, where if you die, you die and it's over. And same with Potato. And I think those games, those sort of power fantasy games where you just get so strong, I think it works very well where if you die, it's just over. A lot of excitement, even though you are very, very strong.
So is it a roguelike, or what keeps people coming back to play longer than 30 minutes once they beat it?
So in my first game, I used something called blood shards, which is basically meta progression where you earn points. And the only reason why I put that into my game was because Splattercat is very famous, great YouTuber who played my game and basically made it go from 500 wishlist to like 5,000 wishlist or something like that. Who was, I guess, in a way, I'm sort of a self-made man, but I also got a really big push by from Splattercat, and it's very hard to say if maybe I would not be a game developer today if it wasn't for Splattercat and the way that he actually made it financially viable for me. I probably would be, but I would probably be maybe more a struggling artist. So, so, so basically, the meta progression, then you earn these points, and then you can spend them to make your next one stronger. And I actually had, I don't really like the meta progression I have in Mage Monsters 1, because I don't like that you just, instead of you having to figure out the game and that you just get more experience and you try new tactics, I don't like the gameplay loop where you just get more health, you just get stronger. So basically you can just keep like um smashing your head against the wall, and sooner or later the wall would break, even though it's a really stupid strategy. But I ended up maybe not thinking for myself there, and maybe just say, okay, I think this guy like knows what he's talking about. He has played so many indie games, and I think he probably knows the indie games better than me. And I think it was a very good decision that I made the meta progression. And I think that was one of the reasons why the game sold. I think it's a solid game, and it's also the meta progression helps a lot. Because in Mage Monsters 2, I wanted to not have that meta progression system. And I made a system where it's more like Potato and Megabonk progression, where as you play, you unlock new stuff. You don't get stronger with, say, the same hero, but you unlock new heroes. And so right now, you start with 3 heroes in Mage Monsters 2, and you end up getting to unlock 18. And I think that works well. but a lot of people actually was very disappointed. And I'm now in the camp that I think it works well where you unlock stuff, but you need to have blood shards. You need to have points. People really love earning points. And I noticed that too when I play Dota. I love like earning points and then getting to spend them. So that's what I'm doing in my upcoming project. I'm doing a multi progression system, but this time where you earn points and then you get to spend those points to unlock instead of just say automatically unlocking it. That
Yeah, you especially can provide us a lot of unique insight because so few developers that I've talked to have released a sequel, and both games have done pretty well. And so, yeah, like you mentioned, you made Mage Monsters and then you made Mage Monsters 2. And so you kind of got to literally kind of almost A/B test some of these things, which are really interesting. So in Mage Monsters 2, there was essentially no meta progression. You only unlock new characters, is what you're saying?
yeah. So and that's kind of my issue. That is meta progression, but a lot of people don't really see that as
Right.
meta progression
Yeah. Right.
because I think it's just much I think it's just much better if it's point based. So you see, and but to say that Potato doesn't do that. Potato doesn't do point based. That's more challenge, I guess, challenge based. But the thing was that I I could have done what I did with heroes, which is good in Mage Monsters 2, but I should also have done it with, say, upgrades. Maybe you don't get to have a lifesteal option in the beginning, but then you get to unlock that later. And maybe you only get to choose, say, 10, max 10 different units, and then you have to unlock heroes, I mean, units. And then you also maybe need to unlock unit special abilities and stuff like that. And I think that also, I really love that way to make progression because that means when you pick up the game, it's not that complex. And because every time I pick up a game, my brain just kind of explodes. It's like my brain says, no, 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 you don't wanna learn this board game. Like, don't do it. So it's very important for me when I play a new game that it's just I can just rock it. I can just understand it just without reading a lot.
Yeah, and we'll circle back. I do have a segment planned for your upcoming game, Doom Dwarves. So we'll kind of pick your brain on how you're planning to solve that meta progression for that game in the future. Something else I do actually want to go back to, which is a really fascinating part of the conversation for Mage and Monsters 1, is that Splattercat picked up the game and played it. And my understanding was that you didn't reach out to him, he just found it. And so you could say that was maybe luck, like you said. How much do you attribute the success of Mage and Monsters to Splattercat playing it?
It's very hard to say. It's in a way it's lucky. I think he found it through Reddit. I basically made a small post on basically a game developer forum, and good YouTubers like him, they know that's the way. That's where you search for the new upcoming games. So I guess it's basically you need to make a game that's ready for a person like Splattercat to be okay. This is actually pretty cool. So it's hard to say. I think it would probably have done pretty well, even without Splattercat. But it's very hard to it's very hard to say exactly.
Yeah, and it's just such a fun thought experiment too, because on the one hand, you can say, well, a huge YouTuber just found it randomly, and that's ultra lucky. But on the other hand, you also did the work to make a game, like you said, that appeals to a person like Splattercat, that is fun. He played it and enjoyed it enough to post the video. You posted on Reddit to put it out there, and so there's a lot of elements that went into that. And one of my favorite questions to ask developers is, and I'll ask you here, is just, do you think game dev as a whole, whenever you look at the whole process of being successful, is it more luck or is it more skill?
I think I think it's just more or less just skill. Even though even that if there is some luck component, I think it's way better that you look at it and you just say, okay, it's skill. Maybe if you have done really bad and you just crashed your launch, then maybe for a week or two, then go, okay, it's all luck. But I think for your own sake and to actually develop as a developer and actually be the best developer you can be, it's much better for you to have the attitude that it's skill. It's skill, and you need basically, if your game doesn't perform, there's something you can do better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm very much in line with your kind of thinking there for sure. Um, yeah, just and then what do you think about Mage and Monsters made it appealing to a content creator like Splattercat? Is there anything that, as you think about that game, and or maybe the post you had as you talk to the audience here, is there anything they could learn from that in how to prepare a game that might actually pick up the eyes of a content creator?
I think the fact that the game is pretty unique, especially at that time. It's if I had made some Zelda clone, I don't think Splattercat would have picked it up. Or if I had made maybe a new Vampire Survivors clone or something like that. The fact that it's actually there's some core gameplay loop that's maybe haven't been seen before, and also the videos ended up doing very well for him. And I think he made 2 or 3 videos on Mage Monsters, and then he also made at least one video on Mage Monsters 2. So it was a win-win situation where he also benefited, and of course also having a decent cover art that he can use that helps a lot.
Yeah, very cool. And then, you've talked about how this is a part of the auto battler genre, even if it's not the same multiplayer sort of auto chess format we're used to. I'm curious what you think makes an auto battler fun. Like, what are the core pillars of that design that you really tried to get really nice?
That's a very good question. What makes an Elspeth fun? I think first of all, at least if you just look at single player, I think probably also multiplayer, you need to have like a lot of options. I think basically with all indie games, a lot of them, I think just giving the player just so many options on how you want to build, say, your army. And then I also think, at least for me with single player, the fact that you can lose it all in just one fight. And I also with that I coupled that with an interest system. So basically, if you save gold, you get extra gold if you win the round. So you have to ask yourself, okay, do I save 300 gold because I know this round 20 is not that hard, or maybe I should go down to 200 gold, but then I will get less gold. So there's always this tension with how strong do I make my army, but then I will earn less gold, and and in 10 minutes my army will be less strong than if I save some gold. So I especially think that made it, I think, very fun for a lot of people to try to min max and try to figure out, okay, how much gold can I save in the beginning without dying.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for those interest-based economies. Even a game like Balatro uses it. Like, it's just such a nice, simple, and easy to understand way to create a little tension and like to create two choices. Now you mentioned that choice is also really important. So what were the ways? I know, as you've said in Mage and Monsters 2, you gave players a lot of characters to use,
Yeah.
but especially in Mage and Monsters 1, where did that player choice come into play? Are they selecting what kind of units they can bring, or where does that choice actually happen in the first game?
First of all, you can decide what hero you will use, and that hero gives you some bonus to use in the game. But then also you have to decide what kind of units you want to buy, and then you need to decide how do you want to upgrade these units. Do you want to give them more health? Do you want to give them more armor, more lifesteal, more attack speed? And how can you say balance those stats? And then also, do you want, maybe you want some melee units to tank a bit, but then also some ranged units in the back. And then also you have also spells. And that's one thing I think it's very unique, I guess, for all auto battlers. And it actually sort of makes it not an auto battler. I call my genre an active auto battler. So you can't play without, you can play it like just a classic auto battler where you just make your army and then you just watch and you can't do anything. But it was very inbuilt in the game as a core system that while your units are fighting, you can cast spells. So you can say heal a unit, or you can freeze some enemy, or you can cast a chain lightning on the backline of the enemy's archers, or you can summon some stuff. So you actually get to kind of be a commander that can. It's kind of like in Heroes of Might and Magic, where your army is fighting, and then you have these spells to use. That was a big inspiration in Heroes of Might and Magic 3 there.
Yeah, I really like the idea of adding that active element just to keep the player engaged. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I actually wondered if Heroes of Might and Magic was an inspiration. That's one of my favorite older games, and I saw kind of the similar DNA even just in looking at the screenshots and stuff. So that's really fun that I was able to pick that up. You drew inspiration well there. As I mentioned, it's pretty rare that I get to talk to someone that's actually made a sequel. And so I was just curious why, after Mage Monsters 1, you decided to make a second game instead of moving on to a new project entirely. Can you take me back into that decision to revisit Mage Monsters?
Sure. So basically, one thing people also ask me is, why did you make a sequel? Why didn't you just keep developing Mage Monsters 1 and then make that bigger?
Right.
But I wanted to take the game or genre or the concept in a direction where it would no longer be Mage Monsters 1. So the original game that I had made, if you had played that when it came out and then you say took 1 year break and then came back, I think it would really suck if now the game is just way different and maybe some core stuff is gone and stuff like that. So that was why I wanted to make a new one, because I wanted to change some, I guess, fundamental ideas. And one of those were the unlock system, where I didn't want to just give the player the option to just, okay, I played 10 hours, so now I get to start with 30% extra health and 30% extra damage.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So you wanted to go in this new direction. Do you feel like you accomplished everything you were hoping to explore in the genre of Mage and Monsters 2, or is some of that coming now in your new game, Doom Dwarves, which we've kind of alluded to?
I would say I think Mage Monster 2 is the game I'm most proud of, and I think it's the most solid of all my games. And hopefully your last game is always that, because you keep on learning stuff. So I think, can you repeat the question, sir?
Yeah. Do you feel like you accomplished everything you wanted to make the genre when you made Mage and Monsters 2?
Yeah, I think I filled out. I think it's a much more, I would say, fleshed out and much more solid concept than Mage Monsters 1. And again, I think my game could probably have sold maybe twice as well if I had done a better meta progression system that had points. And that's one of the things that I'm doing in Doom Dwarfs now. And there might be a Mage Monsters 3 at some point, because one of the things I'm doing in Doom Dwarfs now is that I'm adding items. And I think that adds a whole new complexity. As soon as I feel like I have enough for Mage Monsters 3, I might need to do that. I just need to have enough different stuff where people are not just saying, hey, it's a clone, because I feel like I think it's very hard to avoid people saying it's a clone, but at least have as few people as possible say it's a clone, or why it's just the same as the first one.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense, and always glad to hear that your most recent game is the one you're most proud of, as you mentioned. One other decision I was really curious to ask you about was just why you chose the kind of price difference, and so just so people listening have a little context, Mage and Monsters 2 launched at $9 or $8.99 US at least, and Mage and Monsters 1 was at $4.99, so $5. And it looks like that Mage and Monsters 2 got less reviews than Mage and Monsters 1. So, yeah, just curious about your decision to charge almost double, and then just how you feel like that maybe changed the game or changed people's perception of the game, or amount played and stuff.
I think the reason why I didn't charge above $9 at least was that the price jump would be too big from the first one to the second one. So, and it's kind of, I had a comment who said recently that it's almost doubled in price, which is kind of true, but it's also, let's say my first game sells for $1 and then my second game sells for $2, then it's also double in price. So it's still,
Right.
but but I think if Mage Monsters were priced for say $8, I would probably make Mage Monsters 2 say $12. I think the price is something that's very hard, and maybe it's an easier solution to just ask your players. But yeah, basically I didn't want to go above $9. And one of the reasons why I wanted $9 is that I guess inflation. It's hard to say how much inflation changes things. I think also the quality of Mage Monsters 2 is worth $9 and it's much better than the first one. So basically, I actually only started up pricing Kaltuin, I think $9. That was the first price, either $8 or $9. And because Kaltuin didn't like fulfill my indie dream, I partly based it on the price. So I ended up lowering Kaltuin's price to $4 after a while. I think $8 to $4 or something. And that didn't really make any difference in terms of sales. So I felt that the price, as long as you make a solid game, then the price, as long as people don't feel like you are completely cheating them, then I think you probably want to price it as high as possible.
Yeah, I feel like we're in a really tricky time for indie devs in particular to price because AAA top-end games are getting more expensive. We're starting to see $80 at the top, and inflation is going on. But indie games, like in the sub $15 tier, are getting cheaper and cheaper. And so we're in a weird place for indie devs. So I was very curious in your decision to go higher there. I think more devs should try to raise it maybe a couple dollars, but then there is also this culture on Steam where people are expecting $3 and $5 games. So it's a really tough decision to make a pricing decision, but it's always something I'm curious about. So thanks
I
for sharing your
also,
insight there. Yeah, go ahead.
I've always kind of felt that the whole discount meta on Steam, I'm not sure how I feel about it because I kind of don't like the idea that, let's say I buy a game, and then in a week I can get that game like 75% cheaper. So I could have bought 4 of the same game. But that being said, it's kind of what you need to do unless you are Factorio or something. You basically need to put your game on sale very often. I don't know. I just think the whole constantly having to discount it, I think it works fine on Steam, but I usually try not to have, basically right now I'm using like 33% for all my games as a standard, and then sometimes I might buff it up or make it higher. But I feel like sometimes if it goes too high, it's almost like it's just that poor guy who bought your game like 5 days ago, and now he could have gotten like 7 of those games for the same price or something.
Yeah, there's so many interesting dynamics because Steam is just a discount sort of culture place. Like most people don't buy games unless they're on sale. So like that's just sort of the culture that's been established. And also at some point, I think if you make it too cheap, people will assume there's something wrong. So you also have to balance that as well. Like if your game is 90% off, people might, be a little suspicious that it's actually too cheap. So lots to think about. Very curious. What do you plan to price, or have you decided yet what you'll price Doomed Dwarves at? And is it a similar play length, and is it similar to Mage Monsters 2 in terms of content?
I think I'll probably price it at $9, same as Mage Monsters 2. And I actually ended up wanting the game to be sort of a simple game and not that complicated. But then I got some new cool ideas, which were ideas that I felt like was kind of necessary for the game. And say one thing that I'm working on now is basically magic items. So you always have 7 dwarves, and that could be different dwarves, but now you can also get some magic items that you can put on the dwarves. So it's sort of like vampires style, survivor style, where you can get, say, a ring around you that damages nearby enemies. So basically, you have this visual thing, and I felt that was necessary. So you actually see a difference between when you're starting and you have 7 dwarves, and when you are ending where you still have 7 dwarves. So now suddenly they have all these crazy things on you. If you want to do that, you can also just maybe make them attack like a shotgun, like a submachine gunner, like very fast attack speed. So yeah, I think it was very good that I wanted to make a small game from the beginning, and then actually end up making a medium game, because I would say I'm a medium game developer. I would say there's small games and then medium games and large and then huge games. And I would say I'm probably a medium game developer. I spend about 1 year, 1.5 years developing a game, and then usually also some months afterwards patching it. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. This is a good time, I think, to just transition to talking about Doom Dwarves. Then you've kind of talked a little bit about what it is, but can you give me the elevator pitch for Doom Dwarves and tell us what it is, or anything else to add about how the game will play?
Yeah. So Doom Dwarfs is basically you get to pick 7 dwarfs, and then you need to see how long you can stave off that doom, how long you can make them survive. And then you get to, first of all, you get to mix the dwarves. So you can't say get 7 snipers and just have a sniper dwarf team, or you can get, say, 2 necromancers, a warrior, and a king or something like that. So you can mix the dwarves a lot. And then when you're playing, you have to decide, do I say upgrade my dwarves in a certain way with health, or maybe I need to get some certain items for them or some spells. So there's a lot of directions you can take these dwarves. And a new thing I also added is that when your dwarf dies in combat, it will resurrect the next round, but it will not be full health. So you have to decide, do I want to heal them before the battle start? And that's something new compared to Mage Monsters 2. So it's basically, I try to use much of the same concept as Mage Monsters, but now I added some twists on it, and say, what if all your army doesn't just respawn when you're going to a new level? What if there's some, say, health loss?
Yeah, very cool. And when I look at Doom Dwarves, I see a lot of similarities, at least for sure in the art style, but also maybe a little bit in the way the game plays. Why do you decide to, like, are you taking a strategic decision here to kind of stick in a lane of games that kind of look the same and maybe feel a little bit the same?
So I buy all my art pre-made, and most of the art I use is something that everybody can buy. So that makes the good thing about that is that it makes my games very, very cheap in terms of art style, at least. And it also makes it very easy for me to gain a very clear direction for the game, because all the art is just made before I even type any code. Of course, the downside is that other people can use your art, but I haven't found that too much of an issue. So basically, the art I'm using now is from a guy called Sanctum Pixel. And the reason basically why it's Doom Dwarf is that he made some really great artwork with dwarfs that I wanted to use. And I actually ended up paying an artist to make more dwarfs for me, because I wanted a priest, I wanted a mage, I wanted a necromancer dwarf. So that's something I then bought. But I basically try to find arts that I like and where there's a lot of it from the same artist that I can then use to have sort of a direction in my art. And in Mage Monsters 2, I'm using art from 3 or 4 different artists. So there's some difference, but I think it's a very similar art style.
Yeah, and whenever you find these art packs, do they usually have all the animations and stuff done as well, or is that something that you're customizing those once you buy the assets?
They usually have most of the animations I need, and then for say Kaltuin, the final boss, I ended up buying a lot of new animations because I wanted him to like cast, I don't know, 5 different spells. So that was a bit expensive, but I think it's also a lot easier for artists when you already have all this sprite and this guy, and then you can just ask them, okay, now make him raise his staff or whatever.
Okay, yeah, very cool. I see how you got there then now, so that's pretty fun. You mentioned that you feel like up to this point, Mage Monsters 2 was your best game. Do you think Doom Dwarves will become your best game? And if so, what's going into it that makes you feel that confidence?
It's a good question, and sometimes, and that's always been with kind of all my games. Sometimes you have a day where it's like this is the best game ever, and then other times you have a day where it's like, is this game even gonna work?
Yeah.
I think I think it's hard to say with Doom Dwarfs yet because there's not a demo out yet. So I need to kind of get some more feedback from people. But I think at least I think it's gonna be a solid game where I'm pretty sure there's gonna be some big fans of it. And maybe it will be like Behold Battle, which is a very experimental game where you basically just watch battle. That was the game I did before Mage Monsters 2. And that didn't sell very well, but it has some people who just really love it and that just fits them perfectly. But I guess it's too niche. And I hope Doom Dwarfs will. I guess yeah. I hope it will. It would be nice if it like sold so much that you don't really ever kind of have to think about financials again, at least for a while. I guess my indie dream now is to earn enough money to be able to buy a house before houses rise like 10x more the price. But let's see how that goes. I also think you have to be careful because where I am right now is something 5 years ago I would be like, that's just amazing to be there. Just
Mm.
being able to sustain yourself financially by working on your own and making your own games. That is, I guess, the indie dream. It would be nice to, get a sort of like a similar hit to some of the bigger hits, but that's something to strive for. And I think it's very important that you find the balance that you strive for that, but you don't get too disappointed if you don't hit it. And maybe you'll just keep on striving that and you will make maybe 10 games and you'll keep on striving. And I think that's also a kind of great journey because sometimes maybe you get a potato game and I don't know, maybe that will be his last game because he has just made such a huge success with it. And now he has, I guess, so much money. It's kind of hard to say. Maybe he will announce a huge project that's going to be amazing soon, but who knows?
Yeah, I'm always hopeful that those kind of like indie game legends will come back with something else, and sometimes they have the luxury to just make another game for a really long time and make something really really good,
I guess that would
which is
be Mutagenics.
yeah, exactly like that. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, Mugenics, or I also know the Stardew Valley creator has been working on one for a really long time. Haunted
Oh, cool.
Chocolatier, I think it's called. But yeah, anyway, it gives you a lot more freedom. Yeah.
It's funny because I was thinking about Jonathan Blow and his style of being indie developer. And then a couple of years ago, I was like, okay, do I really want to be an indie developer that hasn't released like a new game for I don't know how many years? But now when I saw his new game, I was like, that's actually amazing. And I think it's amazing that we actually have people who are, I guess, who are still indie developers who can actually devote so much time to make such a quality game. And I think he has, I don't know how many wishes now, but I think it's amazing that we also get those quality of indie games, and we don't just get those indie games that that take 1 year, but maybe also those games that take 5 or 6 or 7 years or even more.
Yeah, and he's like an insane example, Jonathan Blow, because I think this game's been 10 years in the works. And he's a little bit different scenario because I listened to his interview with Thomas Brush. He's almost more like a what Chris Zukowski would call like a triple I studio. Like he has 3.5 programmers helping him. So it's not the same, but still he came out of the origin story of just like a solo indie game dev is my understanding, which is still amazing. And so yeah, it's also gives us a chance as a community of gamers to get really special games when people can work on them for such a long time, which is really exciting to see. So all of it's good. All of it's cool.
I think I hit a very kind of pretty good spot where it usually takes about a year for me to develop a game. And it probably could be a lot faster if I didn't have, say, family and stuff like that. But I think it's good, at least psychologically, that you don't spend, say, 5 years on a game. You need to, I guess you need to be as tough as Jonathan Blow to be able to withstand that. And it's funny, I don't know, a year ago, I think someone asked him, do you think your game would be a success? And I think the response was something like, but who cares? Like, I'm making this great work of art, and who cares
Yeah.
if it's a success? And I kind of like, I just love that answer.
Yeah. The other benefit, though, that I can think of making more games smaller is that you get to roll over everything you learn into a new game. Whereas if you're working so long, you either have to remake stuff a bunch because you're getting way better, and maybe Jonathan blows to the point where he's not improving so fast that there's more things to put in. But just like a fun thought experiment of if I can make a game every 6 months or a year, well, then a year from now, all those learnings go into a new game, which is kind of a benefit, I would say, at least more for most of the people watching this podcast are either working on their first game or are hobbyists or just kind of have the dream of doing it, and so would benefit a lot from continuing to make small stuff.
I think medium. I think medium is like a pretty good spot because you're very incentivized on Steam to get those about 7K wish lists. And even though they changed out the upcoming stuff, I think there's still the 7K mark in terms of the calendar, personal calendar or something. So you're really heavily incentivized to try to get those 7,000 wish lists about. And I think that works pretty well for a medium game at least.
Yeah, that's a good word. And with Doom Dwarves, how long will the Steam page exist about before it actually goes live to sell? How long will the whole thing be?
Will probably be maybe half a year, maybe like 9 months or something. I think one of the things I kind of missed in my game development is that I kind of always, and I think if you can, you should always, before you release your game, you should try to have your next game ready as a Steam page. So when you release a game and you get all this traction, you always have like an icon on your, I don't know, Steam inside your game where it's like, which is my next game. And the guy who did the Dwarves Glory Death and Loot, he did that for his upcoming game, and that game is also very, very popular. So, but he really kickstarted his wishlist doing that. He did it, I think, before the 1.0 release. So there's also kind of one thing that maybe I can quickly mention that basically the reason I don't do early access is that I want to be able to, if I release a game in what I consider a really finished state, and the game really doesn't do well, I want to be able to say, okay, that's it. Which that was basically what I did for Behold Battle. It didn't have much success, so I just maybe patched it, did some fixes for say a couple of weeks, maybe months, and then I moved on. Where if you compared that to Mage Monsters 1 and 2, which was much better financial success, I think Mage Monsters 1 I worked for maybe half a year after release, and Mage Monsters 2 it was maybe also half a year, just doing free updates to it because it was so financially viable for me.
Yeah, you definitely want to be able to drop a project if it's not going well. Were you able to do the strategy with Doom Dwarves where you had the Steam page up um, in Mage Monsters 2, or was it too far apart to do that?
It was too far apart, and I also think I didn't even combine it with a daily deal because I thought the game was too far in the future. But I'm hopeful that I will still reach a decent amount of wish lists, and I'm hopeful that when the demo launches, there will be some YouTubers that pick it up, hopefully. And I think even though it doesn't get the 7K wish list, I still think Steam is such a great place that if you just make a really solid good game, you probably don't need the 7K wish list to just really sell well.
Yeah, I know there's definitely examples of games that did pretty well. And by that, like, I think it was like maybe Click and Conquer devs said they had 3K at launch and they still made over 100K with it or something
Yeah.
like that. So it's not a it's definitely better to have the 7K, but it's not that if you don't, you are going to completely fail for sure. It's just a good signal, it seems like. So, any other marketing things that you've been thinking about with Doom Dwarves that you've either learned from the past or that you think will be a big focus?
Well, I think my biggest traumatic experiences as a indie game developer is getting some really nice posts on Reddit that people just love, and it's just going to Reddit gaming front page, and you're getting all these eyes on your project, and you are finally saying, "Okay, this is so good," and then some Reddit mod says, "You have not posted enough cat pictures or whatever, so now we will remove your post," or I don't know. I think I don't think those people realizes how crushing it can be, and I don't know. I just think there's this great Reddit mod meme where's this guy who's just basically, I know that this past post was really people loved it and it's really fits our subreddit, but for some rule we cannot have it here. I don't know. I I cannot rant enough against some of the Reddit stuff. And I guess it's really nice when you can be in a position as game developer where you don't have to rely on Reddit for your marketing.
Yeah, Reddit seems like truly a wild card in all things marketing. Every story I've heard is like that. Like it's the Wild West out there. You never know
Yeah.
what you're
But
getting into.
then so I talked with, just a podcast with the guy from the Dwarves, Glory Dead and Loot. And he also, had posted a game on Reddit. And he was just like, I was just admiring, like he was just, that's just a game and that's fine. And I was just sitting here, that has just crushed me so many times. But so I was really admiring of how like he was just able to just brush it off. And, I need to have maybe 1 or 2 or 3 days where I'm just really down because I could have 2,000 more wish lists instead of, I don't know, 1,000 wish lists or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to have thick skin and be prepared for those low moments as a game dev for sure.
Yeah, also the comments you get, I don't know. I'm from Denmark and I don't really post about my game anymore to Danish subreddits or whatever because you always get some people who are just, oh, you made 3 games in 3 years. Oh, you make these crappy games you just spit out or whatever. And I don't know. There's you kind of, especially when you're starting and you're playing your first, I guess, game, you kind of just have to roll with it and just be. I need views. I need people to see it, and I'm gonna accept that I'm also gonna get flamed for it, and people are gonna insult me, and yeah.
Yeah, that's just the nature of the internet. I mean, even like this podcast gets a fair amount of comments being, hating on either myself or something the dev says. Like that's just a part of there's a weird part of gaming or game dev culture which is slightly gatekeepery like that in a way from people that haven't made anything especially. So it is an interesting part of the community. So that's interesting
I
that you don't post anymore.
I think. Well, I basically, I guess I will post sometimes to just, I don't know. I'll post to YouTube and I'll post to probably Reddit, but just some small stuff. But it's funny because I think it helps with me. I always kind of like creative stuff. When I was really good at Dota 1, I made some YouTube series called Perceptive Play, and I think they ended up getting like 500,000 views, and that was in 2004
Wow.
or something. Just some, and then my account ended up getting hacked. The
No.
YouTube account got deleted, and you didn't get any revenue. So it was just kind of, I just did it just for fun. But you also get like people there, especially my Slashes Way videos with Dota 2. I would get so many people who were like, you ruined my games and stuff like that. And yeah, so I guess it's kind of if you create and you show things on the internet, you just kind of unfortunately have to accept that you get people who comment to some part of your look or whatever.
Yeah, well, speaking of people with big opinions on the community, let's get ready to fire some people up. I'm curious, and maybe you won't have anything for this, but are there any opinions that are sort of widely accepted in the game dev community that you disagree with?
Well, I don't know. For some reason, most of the game development community is very, very left leaning, and I don't know. Probably shouldn't get too much into politics, but I've been very, very left leaning myself, and I don't know. I try to kind of like not. I try to have politics stay out of game development, but I think it can be an issue if we get to if we're not focusing on great games, but we're just maybe focusing on, I don't know, accomplishing these sort of real life goals. I don't know. And I also think it's kind of like, especially as a beginner, and if you haven't made it kind of yet, you're thinking, okay, so being where I'm from, if I was from a different place, I could, enter this festival, or if I was like a different type of person, I could gain access to this, but because my skin is the color I am, I'm not able to join any special festivals and stuff like that. Which is, I guess, you just have to rely much more on your own skills, and you don't get any. I guess you just have to think, okay, I'm gonna just have this be entirely like, even though there's no maybe special help or special promotion, I'm just still gonna try to make it as best as I can.
Sure. And I think my take is that mostly like politics driven game design decisions, I don't think indie devs too often are thinking about that. Maybe I'm wrong. This is a good chance for the comment section to jump in if that's not true for them. I think that's something that maybe is happening more in AAA where there's these sort of, in different ways, different stories or ideologies that they want to promote. But I think most indie devs are trying to just make a good game that's fun. And of course, putting themselves into it, which kind of ties into our whole being and our politics are in there somewhere and what we think. That all comes out in our art for sure. But yeah, that's an interesting concept to think about.
I don't know much about AAA, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's like sometimes when you see some stuff from AAA, it's almost like someone is like intentionally trying to crash the whole AAA stuff. Like and I guess it's very nice for an indie dev that a lot of your maybe competition is actually like doing some stuff where you're thinking, what's going on? Like, why are all the great like, where's my Skyrim today, or where's my StarCraft Brood War today, or like all these just it's like, I guess we just had a golden age of like huge games, which like if you just look at World of Warcraft today, it's just the old, like at least compared to the new classic to the old classic, the custom support was just so much better in the past.
Hmm.
And yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Do you think indies are even competing with AAA? I've kind of been going back and forth on this in my head because the price difference is so big. Like, are we even competing in the same thing or is it almost just like a completely different category? What do you think?
I don't know. I'm not even sure if like I care too much about the question, because it's like, I guess you're also competing with say Netflix, and
Sure. That's
it's
fair.
it's kind of, I feel like it's kind of like an idle question, because let's say you are competing with them. Well, should you then do something different if you're not competing? I'm not sure if the answer is yes, should that change something in the way I do indie development? And or if the answer is no, should that change something? I'm not sure if it has like any consequences. Maybe someone in the comment can tell me I'm wrong and that it has some consequences in the way I don't know, sell my game.
Yeah, no, actually that makes sense. It's similar to that idea of skill versus luck. It's like, well, even if it is luck, there's no benefit to just thinking about how much it's luck based. You still gain by doing your best and by putting your head down and believing in the power of your own actions. So no, that makes perfect sense. That's a good answer. Um, Okay, well, this has been a lovely chat. We've knocked out all of my questions except for the final one, so I've appreciated your time. But this is the Dev Dream podcast, and for anyone listening, I am always inspired by hearing about what the dreams of others are. And you kind of teased it a little bit with the house, but just to wrap up the podcast nicely, what would you say is your game dev dream in this season of life?
I guess in a way I have already accomplished it, and I hope to just if I can keep going and I can just sustain myself and feed my family doing this, then that's the dream achieved, and I guess keep on achieving it. And one thing I would really love at some point to get into with game development would be to work more with others' projects. And I actually tried at some point some months ago to I looked at Steam and I saw some pretty decent games, but maybe I don't know 7 reviews. And I tried to reach out to them and I tried to say pitch that maybe we should kind of like try to work together. You make the project, but I use all my experience to help you with it, and then I get some sort of cut. And that I think I'll message maybe I don't know 6 or 7 people. I think people. I think it's also when you just kind of cold message people and they don't know you, they maybe just think it's a scam or something. But I think my dream would probably be that I'm still gonna make my own games, but I'm also involved with other games, especially let's say mm, consulting would say what do we do on Steam, but also just game design and stuff like that. Because I really love when let's say there's some project, there's some problem. You're trying to make kind of new game and you're trying to go to some territory, uncharted territory where nobody has gone before. You have some new challenges, new problems. And I love where I just kind of have to, just take a walk or be in my garden or whatever and just think, okay, so what are the ways to solve this? And so yeah, if anyone is out there are interested in that, you can try to reach out to me. And so yeah, that'll probably be my dream to actually work with others and do it in a beneficial way for both of us.
Well, Lasse, that's a awesome dream. I hope you're able to make it a reality. Yeah, I'll put your contact info in the description if anyone's
I
listening
don't
and
do it
that sounds
because
interesting.
I think it's also a good challenge that if people are interested in it, then it's not that hard to find themselves. So
Sure. Yeah. Well, you can go hunting then. So, yeah, thanks again for the chat. It's been a
thanks for
pleasure.
having me on.
Yeah.